First of all, I have to admit that I hadn't even heard of Nick Fuentes until recently. A friend of mine did a series of very funny videos on Nick, and that was pretty much the last I thought of it. Until now, when Nick Fuentes seems to be getting more publicity than Donald Trump. When I first started looking around, I saw all the usual clips about Nick being a Nazi with a long list of grievances against people that he hated. Well, I've watched a lot of his videos now, and I think I have a decent understanding of what he really stands for. Now, as you can probably imagine, it doesn't align, at least in my opinion, with most of the narratives that are currently out there. So here is my take on Mr. Fuentes, as well as some advice to him as he continues his philosophical journey. First point I want to make is that Mr. Fuentes is perhaps the most canceled man in America. Government and private interests have punished this person mercilessly by taking his money, limiting his movement, almost certainly surveilling his communications. As far as I know, without even accusing him of a crime. Now, regardless of Mr. Fuentes' take on any given issue, no matter how distasteful we may find it, this kind of persecution, and that's what it is, it's persecution, in today's day and age is insane. And if people think that this is the best way to reduce his influence, the reverse is happening. A la Donald Trump, the more you attack him, the stronger you make him. Mr. Fuentes' main idea, the idea that underpins pretty much everything else he does, is that young Christian white men are being attacked from all sides. Now, there's a very long list of those responsible for these attacks, but he boils this list down to two main categories: ethnic minorities and Jews. And among the ethnic minorities, he has a particular concern about black people. Now, like with many influencers, there's a grain of truth to some of these concerns. Mr. Fuentes says that in many cases, white people have negative interactions when they encounter black people. He talks about the elevated levels of violence in that community, expresses skepticism that this has anything to do with systemic racism, and believes instead this has to do with cultural issues deeply ingrained that predate even slavery in the United States. Regarding the Jews, Mr. Fuentes believes that there are very powerful Jewish interests in the United States that seek to stifle any criticism whatsoever that may be directed at Israel or the Jewish community in general. He also points out that most Jews are Democrats and that too many Jews have shown an inclination to tear at the foundations of American society through support of woke, us versus them, oppressor versus oppressed narratives. Oh, and he does go on to say he believes not a lot of women are rational. Okay, these are statements that some of us, many of us maybe, might agree with. If you've seen Mr. Fuentes at all, the chances are you've seen some pretty horrific sound bites. In this day and age, you can get sound bites from just about anybody. But I do want to make it clear. Mr. Fuentes is caustic, inflammatory, accusatory, and unkind in many cases. He uses language that simply doesn't need to be used in today's day and age, at least not by people like most of us. On the other hand, for his audience, this is exactly the kind of language that needs to be used. And in fact, it is the language as much as the ideas that energize the type of people that form Mr. Fuentes' fan base. I've expressed frustration before at influencers and pundits who stoke negativity, envy, and rage while providing no solutions whatsoever. Mr. Fuentes is a classic example of this. Take a look at this clip of what Mr. Fuentes says when asked directly, based on his ideas, what kind of leadership he actually is proposing.
I guess I just wonder, because I will say just quickly, a lot of people might watch this and say, oh, Nick is going liberal. In many ways, I have kind of, I don't want to say taken like a leftward turn, but I have become, and I think as happens with everybody, you get a little older and I become a little bit less like, I would say ideologically, in favor of autocracy, but also just skeptical of a lot of the arguments for it, because there's this old argument from Carlyle where he says the best form of government is where you find the most capable man and make him the dictator. And to me, that just seems like a LARP. That just seems like role play, because it's like, Yeah, and if we could, make everything awesome, we would make everything awesome.
This, to me, is absolutely mind-boggling. In the past, Nick has said he favors an authoritarian Christian regime, something like the Roman Empire. Now, more recently, though, he suggested that getting just the right dictator might be a little more difficult than he anticipated. You think? Now, Nick cherry picks, or actually picks the pieces of rotten fruit from our current society, focuses all his energy on dissecting and often inflating these problems, whips his supporters into a frenzy that demands action, and at the end of all that, has no coherent plan. How the heck do you think this is going to turn out? Well, Mr. Fuentes is now finding this out firsthand. He's not a stupid man. He's intelligent, extremely articulate, and knowledgeable in some specific aspects of our society. Now, after the Charlie Kirk assassination, Mr. Fuentes, as an intelligent person, did not immediately accuse Israel of the murder. The firestorm that erupted subsequent to his relatively measured response to this horrific event was incredibly intense and also quite predictable. Mr. Fuentes has built, and I would say on purpose, has built a fan base of people who really don't think very much. They see something they don't like in their lives, they find a scapegoat, and they express their rage. And that's about it. Mr. Fuentes seemed dumbfounded by the reaction of some of his fans who immediately accused him of being a Jew lover. He tried to explain to them that, guys, when new information comes in, and it's credible information, well, we should think about that before we decide what our position is going to be. Blasphemy! He got the call. The Jews paid him off. These are all direct quotes from his comments section. Mr. Fuentes, you're a smart man. Use that intelligence to analyze, understand, and accept the fact that the reaction that you're getting now is the only possible result of the approach that you have taken in building your following. For these people, there must be a conspiracy. There's always a conspiracy, and nothing ever happens that is not a conspiracy. Now, anyone who doesn't immediately call out the conspiracy is now part of the conspiracy, regardless of how little factual information there is to back it up. Look at Donald Trump as an example. The conspiracy folks finally got a bunch of their own people to go in there and at long last uncover the conspiracies, JFK, Area 57, and on and on. When it eventually turned out there was no there, the howls of rage began. Put aside the fact that the Kash Patels of the world have extremely strong incentives to uncover whatever conspiracies that there might have been. Well, they could have become heroes by doing this. There's no rational reason for them to bend the knee and hide the evidence. It didn't matter at all, and it won't matter to your followers either, Mr. Fuentes. I've heard you say that your thinking is evolving. Take my advice. Have it evolve in this direction. By all means, continue to point out factual problems that we have in our society. By all means, continue to question authority. In fact, especially in the wake of COVID, this should be our default response to everything. But man, you're going to have to come up with some answers. Railing about problems and doing only that will only take you so far. It will only attract certain people. It will only get one reaction when you inevitably dare to use your brain. As a younger man, you said you were fully convinced that we needed a king. Now you say you're not so sure. Well, that's progress. Build on that. You said one of the first books you ever read was Milton Friedman's Free to Choose. You said that you've read some of the material of Thomas Sowell. Nick, all the answers are there. They're all there. They explain the things that you're concerned about, how they happened, how they can be addressed, and how you can be a productive voice in this conversation. You need to find a way to realize that in the things that really matter, you probably have more in common with Dennis Prager, the conservative Jew, than you do with Pope Francis, the liberal Catholic. You've made it this far by labeling people and seeming to write them off, even if you don't say that out loud, which sometimes you have. In order to continue, you need to drop the labels, recognize the reality, the absolute reality, but drop the labels and the name calling and the manufactured fervor in favor of real, defensible, logical ideas that can stand on their own merits and don't need to be whipped up into something that they're not in order to succeed. Because here's the thing. You're right about some of the things you say, but you're wrong in the way that you deliver these ideas and purposely feed the negative emotions of your followers. If you're paying attention at all, now you have no choice but to recognize the reality of what I'm saying. Just read your own comments section. Now, I wouldn't have taken the time to deliver this message unless I thought that there was hope. And your followers, if any of them are watching this, are certainly chortling at some old guy with 3 subscribers daring to give advice to their messiah. But it should be the message that is important, not the messenger. You're a smart man. Think it over. Where's all this going? If the answer isn't clear, or if you're not happy about what you're seeing, consider a different path. It's right there. All you have to do is take it.